May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Today we are celebrating the baptism of Ben and Jarina, an ancient rite that signifies that they are being embraced into this community of faith with the people present now, the people who have followed Jesus in the past, and the people who will follow Christ in the future. I know we have struggled with how religion, especially Christianity, has been presented in our times, but for today, let's look at our faith as today's psalm describes, that we are people who believe that God's works, and we believe in the welfare for all people of the earth. And how will this happen? How will all the peoples of the earth experience God's welfare and well-being? I think this happens through community, through caring for each other's needs, for providing emotional and physical and spiritual support. Community is often God's way of working in the world, we being God's hands and feet. We are God's people, and today we are welcoming Ben and Jarina into a community that has the welfare and well-being of the people of the earth as a high priority. I would like to reflect on this celebration of community and God's love for the world in our readings today. I want to particularly focus on a line that is in the book of Jeremiah that says, "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for it is in its welfare you will find your welfare." I first encountered this text shortly after graduating from college, and even though I grew up in a urban center in the Northeast, I found myself living in a rural, mostly rural and somewhat suburban area with very little diversity, either ethnically or age-wise. I became very frustrated. I struggled with this little town that I lived in. Some of its people, the microaggressions, the lack of interesting restaurants, no bookstores. I wanted to go home. During that time, I was praying to God, why am I here? And my friends are all in cool places like New York and Boston. I began to search the Bible for answers. Now, during one of my searches, you know the kind where you kind of just open the Bible and let it fall and read whatever's ever there. I don't recommend that method. But, some of us try it anyway. And there it was. I opened up to this verse that we read today in Jeremiah. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. That's not funny, God. This is not what I wanted to hear. I don't know what I was looking for, but what I think I wanted was permission from God to get out of town. But instead, I found another option that I had not considered: to stay, settle in, and look for the welfare of the city and the well-being of the place where I was actually coming close to really not liking. But in the end, I took this option, and it changed my life. It was, like the Robert Frost poem, taking the road less traveled. But in all fairness, the story in the book of Jeremiah is much less a road less traveled, but it's more of a road traveled because of oppression and subjugation. So this morning, may I tell you the backstory to our reading in Jeremiah? Okay. Some of you might know this already, but this text comes from the Hebrew Bible and references a significant period in Jewish history when, in the 6th century before the Common Era, Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar captured the king of Judah, his court, his family, and thousands of workers, and took them to Babylon. Now that's like kidnapping the president, the vice president, the cabinet, the State Department, House of Representatives, and Congress. I know, don't dwell on that thought too much. And imagine transporting them all to Canada. That's what it was like. And so that period of exile lasted 60 to 70 years until Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was conquered by Cyrus of Persia, who was a much nicer person and actually let them go home. But they didn't all go home. Some stayed in Babylon, some moved a little bit away from Babylon, and then some did return to Judah. Scholars say that this period of exile was the beginning of the Jewish diaspora. In our reading today, the prophet Jeremiah, who witnessed all the wars leading up to this captivity, is addressing a group of people who are these exiles who have lost their land, they've lost their place in society, and they are very upset about this. And what does Jeremiah say to them? He says, "This foreign land which is not yours, seek the welfare of the city in which you reside. Instead of mourning for what was lost during the exile, their temples, their customs, their families, their history, Jeremiah told them to invest in the welfare of the city where they lived." Now, I'm sure the exiles from Judah didn't want to hear this any more than I did. They wanted to go home. They wanted to recover what was lost. Loss. That is something many of us have experienced, especially in this time of the pandemic. Today's gospel is also a reflection about loss. The lepers in our gospel reading had lost a great deal. Not only had they lost their health to leprosy, a terrible disease where your flesh rots away while you're still alive, and essentially you are slowly dying, a death that could take years, if not decades. Leprosy was also very contagious. So when someone was diagnosed with leprosy, they were pushed out, often away from their families, their livelihood. They lose everything and have to live in a prison of pain. Lepers often start with they're living a normal life, and then they notice a particular lesion. And then the next you know, everything is upended. In our gospel reading today, these 10 lepers of pain and loneliness. Then they noticed Jesus passing through their land on his way to Jerusalem. They approached him, no doubt, hearing of Jesus' reputation as a healer. They approached him and asked for mercy. And almost immediately, almost as suddenly as some of them had developed the disease, they were suddenly healed, and their life sentence as lepers was commuted. Jesus told the lepers to verify the healing with the priest, and the 10 lepers went to get their negative leprosy test from the priest. But one leper returned. I don't know the ethnicity of the other 9 lepers, but the 10th leper was a Samaritan. The Samaritans were often oppressed and marginalized people within Judea and Galilee. So this leper who's a Samaritan was like twice oppressed. And now all of a sudden he's healed. So why did he come back to Jesus? I actually think that the 10th leper understood something about grief and loss that we can learn. Because I think the other 9 lepers, they went back to get their old lives. They went back to recover what was lost. But in reality, once these things are lost, you can't get them back. The 10th leper, on the other hand, was realizing his new situation. And he was really coming to an understanding of something had changed. And so instead of trying to go back to life before leprosy, he was embracing his identity as a former leper and went and and thanked Jesus for healing him. What's the difference? The 10th leper was incorporating this new information into a new sense of making meaning of the world, which is a lot different from how many people experience loss, where you lose the person or lose the situation, and you sit and kind of your understanding of the world is based on when those things were in your life. But the world has changed. And it's like sitting in the midst of a vacuum. A group of constructivist psychologists describe the grieving process, a healthy grieving process, as not being stuck on the edge of that vacuum, not being stuck in the moment where everything changed, but actually to move on beyond that moment by, like the 10th leper, reconstructing a world of meaning that incorporates the loss. I would say the 9 lepers really didn't come to grips with the fact they had leprosy. They wanted to forget that. The 10th leper was incorporated the fact he used to be a leper and now he's healed. And I think that's what allowed him to go back and thank Jesus for the healing. Protracted grief is the inability to find meaning in the wake of the unsought transition. These psychologists are basically saying what grievers need to do is incorporate a new world of meaning that includes the loss. And then when that happens, you're going to be able to move forward. I think this is what Jeremiah was saying when he said, seek the welfare of the city in which you reside. Instead of just standing by the waters of Babylon and weeping and wailing, Jeremiah said, you're in Babylon now. Try to incorporate that into your new understanding of the world and continue the ultimate goal of God's people, which is the welfare of all peoples of the earth. We are in difficult times, right? Full of loss, full of unexpected transitions. Perhaps what we need is to embrace that which is lost, but find new meaning in our changed circumstances. This is what is meant by seeking the welfare of the city that exiled you. And perhaps in seeking meaning, we might be able to bring about not only the welfare and well-being of the city, but justice for the city. Letting go of the past, joining a new community, and investing in its well-being. You know what this sounds like? It sounds like baptism. In baptism, baptism came out of the first century Christian community that was in crisis. They were in occupied territory under the rule of the Roman Empire. They were often persecuted for being Jewish, and then when they followed Jesus, they were persecuted for that too. Many of them knew of the Jewish cleansing rites. In fact, that's the rites that John the Baptist used for the early disciples and Jesus. But this cleansing rite needed new meaning under the new circumstances. And so now the followers of Jesus practice a cleansing rite that symbolized the death and loss of an old way and the birth of a new way into a new community. While this is a joyful occasion, baptism simultaneously signifies the rite of loss and the rite of new birth. Baptism signifies joining a community who believes in the works of God and God's welfare for all. A community that collectively seeks the welfare of our cities and communities. For in welfare of our communities, we may find our own welfare. When we bless the communities in which we live, we are also blessed. But this may mean that you will have to give up your old world of meaning when you did everything by yourself and adopt a new meaning to an old perspective that is reflective of being a new community. For those being baptized today, we pray that this moment will signify a new relationship with the community and other followers of Christ. This moment, I believe, for Ben and Jarena will last their whole lives. I recently ran into one of my old pastors who is like 92, and he said, "I remember the day you were born. I remember the day you were born." And I'm kind of old. And that was a long time ago. But the fact is, this baptism today is a blessing not only to Ben and Jarena, but to all of us and all of you. And this is a moment we may live on for decades. And in this moment, Ben and Jarena are joining this community who is committed to the welfare and well-being of the city in which you live. We hope that this moment will add meanings not only to Ben and Jarena and their families' lives, but to your lives. And we hope that in our troubled world, we can work together, pray together for the welfare of our city, be God's hands and feet in the world as we strive for justice and equality, healing, forgiveness, and insight. And may the meaning of the struggles in the world be transformed by our collective community efforts into one that strive for the welfare of all the people on earth. Ben and Jarena, we need your gifts and your presence. Just your smiles and your laughter has already given us blessing. And so in a few moments, we will be welcoming Ben and Jarena into this community. May this addition to your community signify new meaning for all of us, that our community of people who strive for justice and the welfare of all has just increased by 2. We need your gifts, and we are blessed by your presence. And so, in preparation for the baptism, I invite you to just a few moments. Thank you.